Hello students, once again I'm recording the recap of our discussion on other options for Ms. Ling besides H-1B. So let's start quickly with the H-1B1 for citizens of Singapore. That's basically the same as H-1B, albeit the procedure would have been much easier. So just remember our last week's discussion that most likely she's not eligible because bookkeeper is not the specialty occupation. And whatever I suggested as a possible option for her, provided that her specialty, that her work in Singapore was actually, not as a bookkeeper, but something much more high level and much more professional. And if the job proposed by Abacus is not really a bookkeeper, but something that could qualify as a professional business manager or a similar job, then maybe there is a very, very small chance of success. So for an H-1B1, all these issues are still relevant and all these arguments apply. Now let's go to H-2B. This is the most interesting part, I think, of this week's discussion. That would be the option that I would recommend, actually, if I were these clients' attorney. The main issue, the main problem with the H-2B that you discussed at length in your comments, and that some of you concluded that it's an issue, some of you concluded that it could be overcome, is the fact that Singapore is not one of the designated countries for H-2B program. This is the correct conclusion and a good point, and it makes the case much more complicated than it otherwise would be. But I don't think that's the end of the matter. I think that we can still make a good argument that the government should exercise discretion and approve this case even though Singapore is not designated. In Kerr's band, you see the factors the statutory factors that the government should consider in deciding whether to approve a case for a citizen of a non-designated country. And I believe that these factors could be applicable in this situation. So the one factor is whether the person complied previously with H-2B, with the conditions of H-2B visa. Clearly, in our case, she never had an H-2B visa, at least to our knowledge. So that's not relevant, but we can mention that she had an F-1 visa, and presumably she complied with the requirements for that visa. Another factor is that the skills that the company is looking for are not available from citizens of designated countries. So to that effect, we can argue that the company searched and advertised and looked for a bookkeeper and they couldn't find anyone. So that basically tells us that there are no Americans that would be available and that there are no citizens of designated countries that would be available. I do not believe that there is any obligation on behalf of the company to actually, advertise in designated countries or engage in some major international search of a bookkeeper. I think that would be a very unreasonable burden, and I never heard of that argument made by the government. So I think that whatever they did would be sufficient as an effort to find a candidate from a designated country, so we can tell that they are not available. The third factor is potential for fraud or abuse of the program. I don't see any potential of that, and I don't think the government would see that either. And in the end, we can add other factors that, in our opinion, benefit the United States. Here, I would argue that Abacus is an American company. It employs other American workers. It works, probably collaborates in some capacity with other American businesses. It is an American taxpayer, and so on and so forth. So they, the fact that they desperately need a bookkeeper to continue their business for another 2 years before they close the office, that's a good argument for U.S. interest. Now, temporariness, that's basically what I was aiming at when I added a second condition, like the provision that the office is closing in 2 years. If it's not there, then I don't think there's any way to convince immigration that the position is temporary. It's not. It would be a full-time, regular position in the normal operations of the business, so the case would be denied. But if we tell them that the office will be closing in 2 years and provide some evidence of that in the form of a business plan or some other evidence, or just a statement of a CEO or something like that, then I think we have a shot. They would still have to pay the prevailing wage. So the wage is still an issue. For H-2B, it's not like, we don't have levels as we do for H-1B. For H-1B, there are like, each occupation has 4 levels. For H-2B, there's just one median wage, but they have to pay. So I think that H-2B is a good option for this case if the office is closing. Now the OPT, that's another option that you discussed at length, is also, in my opinion, a good option, but it's more limited. It's not going to cover them for eternity. It's not going to cover them even for 2 years if they, if that's all they need. But for the duration of OPT, which is normally 1 year after graduation, the client can work for Abacus as a bookkeeper. That's provided that she has an employment authorization already, or that she still has time to apply for it because she recently graduated. So if it was less than 60 days ago, she can still apply, get employment authorization, and work for Abacus for the rest of the year. She's not qualified for STEM extension. Some of you brought it up. Bookkeeping is not science or technology or engineering or mathematics, for that matter. Even though she works with numbers, but it doesn't make it mathematics. So that's not applicable, and I don't think it would be applicable to any associate degree at all. Now the good option is that the employer doesn't have to do anything. They don't have to pay government fees, they don't have to pay her prevailing wage, they don't have to employ her for any specific number of hours. She's basically, as good as any American worker for that purpose. The school will have to approve the employment. I think it would be approvable, even though some of you raised an issue that for degrees in office management, but the work as a bookkeeper, I think it's close enough, and school officials are usually not that literalistic in approving or disapproving OPT, and she studied some bookkeeping, so I think it's still within the realm of her studies to be continued.